Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Lockdown is next week? Next week? What the fuck? If it surprised you to learn that not only was Lockdown not a pay-per-view anymore, but also that it was next week on Impact, I wouldn't blame you. I don't think it was mentioned on the show before this week. Even Josh Matthews sounded confused when he talked about it, which was very strange. I would think you'd want your lead announcer in hard sell mode on what I guess was the Lockdown Go-Home show. Apparently TNA had other ideas. So let me get this straight, Taz. Lockdown used to be a pay-per-view, but now it's not? That's right, Josh. I'm telling you. And now it's on TV? Next week? Right again, buddy. Huh. I have so many questions about this, but since I'm probably not going to get any satisfying answers, I guess I'll just talk about Impact instead. As the weeks go by, TNA seem to be working out the kinks in their presentation format. The production's getting smoother. I think they're zeroing in on what works for them and what doesn't. I still don't like that the arena is so dark. Really want them to turn the damn house lights on, but other than that, there was very little to complain about here. As a go-home show, you could certainly poke a bunch of holes in this, but as a regular Impact, this was probably the best installment since they started on Destination America. Something that helped a lot with that was them starting to incorporate more compelling story elements. The stuff with Magnus and Bram I thought was especially well done. Magnus meets Bram at a bar to try to hash out the business with the briefcase last week, and this whole segment was produced very well. It didn't feel phony or staged. It didn't come off like two wrestlers reciting unnatural, stilted dialogue. It felt like two real guys just shooting the shit. There was an authenticity to this that you just don't get with WWE pre-tapes. The whole thing was very thoughtful, too. We learn a lot about Bram's character and why he is the way he is, as well as why Magnus seems to be changing his ways recently. He's become a father, he wants to provide for his family, and that's made him kind of reevaluate his priorities. It's a simple explanation, it made perfect sense, it felt real, and it made Magnus surprisingly sympathetic here. And as I was watching this, I said to myself, wow, you know, that was actually kind of poignant. Especially when Bram seemed to come around for a minute there. And the whole thing was set up so well that I was a little upset when Bram attacked Magnus after they left the bar. And not just because I really wanted to see them work as a tag team. And yes, Bram essentially screwed himself out of a tag team title shot, which was stupid. But it makes sense in this case, knowing what we now know about Bram, that he can't control his temper, and it leads to him acting really irrational. Very compelling stuff here. As a character-building segment, this gets an A+. Hey, awesome! Tommy Dreamer's back! Said no one in the last 5 years.
It's not the 90s anymore, and nobody wants to see you in spandex.
I suppose I should be grateful that at least he didn't try to get an ECW chant going, but every time Tommy shows up these days, I kind of roll my eyes. And it didn't help that he didn't really have a concrete reason to be out there. He tells Eric Young not to burn bridges with his friends and with the fans. Why does Tommy care if he does? What, because Eric was nice to him when he joined the company a few years ago? So what? Tommy's justification for being out there was pretty flimsy, but I forgave that because it led to this unintentionally hilarious moment. Him asking EY if he'd even asked Bobby Roode for a title shot before he stabbed him in the back. Eric's reaction to this was fucking priceless. He doesn't say anything, but there's this moment where he thinks about that and he's like, oh, fuck. As it dawns on him that if he just asked Bobby Roode for a title shot in the first place, Roode probably would have given him one and he could have easily avoided this whole mess. And in that moment, Eric Young looks and feels like such an unbelievable jackass that he can't even offer a retort. All he can do is just beat the piss out of Tommy. Sue me, this shit was funny. I don't think it was supposed to be, but it was. And it made using Tommy worth it. He's over in New York, it helped get some heel heat on Eric, and if this heel EY thing is going to work, they do need to commit to it. So, another surprisingly good segment here. And on top of that, this was arguably the strongest show for wrestling that they put on since the new TV deal kicked in. I don't know why Gail Kim and Madison Rayne are getting title shots against Taryn Terrell when Havoc hasn't even gotten her rematch yet. I guess we're just forgetting about that. But this was a really good triple threat match from the Knockouts here. They worked out some nice three-way combination moves, there were some interesting bumps, and we could probably expect a lot more of those with the trained stunt woman Taryn as the champion. Madison's got no business being in the title picture at this point, but she was only in there to eat the pin so Taryn could win without beating Gail, and I'm fine with that. Solid match, the right girl went over, the right girl got pinned. No complaints here. The only thing I could take issue with was that we got this instead of something with Havoc and Kong. They're the ones wrestling on the Lockdown card next week, and they weren't even on this show. I don't know why. I confess, TNA have done so damn many Monsters Balls in the last year, plus they're having street fights almost every week now, and overall I'm feeling really desensitized to all of this. So it's difficult for me to work up any enthusiasm when you put Abyss and Jeff Hardy in a Monsters Ball match. Make no mistake, they were working hard, and this was a good match. It just didn't feel special to me. I felt like I've seen this all before because they've done these things like 1,000 times. However, that changed pretty quickly. The match only goes a couple of minutes, so they keep the energy level very high, and I don't have time to get bored with it before the interference starts. The Revolution attack Jeff, Matt tries to help, the Wolves make the save, and as strange as it sounds, all this chaos got me interested in the match when I wasn't before. During their final days on Spike, one of my big complaints was that the show was mostly bare-bones wrestling with not much else going on story-wise. This seemed to be heading in that direction, but then they injected a little something extra into it, and that actually got it to pique my interest. It wouldn't work in every case, but in a Monsters Ball, I was just praying for something different to happen. And the finish was great too. Sunset flip powerbomb onto thumbtacks and a swanton bomb on top of that. Yes, we've seen that all before, but points for effort, man. It looked like a big clusterfuck on paper, but I'll be damned if this segment didn't turn out to be a lot of fun. Son of a bitch! You tease us with a match for our Lord of Wrestling EC3, only to give us a bromance match instead? Why do you hate me, TNA? Why?
Urge to kill rising.
EC3 deems Rockstar Spud unworthy of a match with the hardcore American icon, so Spud and Mark Andrews get the bromance. And that actually worked out. The bromance are a jobber team, so Spud and Mandrews could get over on them and look strong. And they were good enough to actually rise above these chuckleheads and pull an enjoyable match out of the bromance here, which is no mean feat. It was an impressive start for Mandrews, and god damn, that shooting star press was sweet, wasn't it? I think EC3 is still healing from bicep surgery, so they have to work around that, hence why we're getting Spud and Mandrews versus Tyrus at Lockdown. I don't care for that idea, but kudos to EC3 for doing probably the most effective hard sell we got on this show. One thing I should point out here. So Angelina Love is totally fine working with the guy who got her BFF of many years fired last week. She's not upset about that whatsoever. She didn't even bring it up. And that says an awful lot about how inconsequential Velvet, Angelina, and the Beautiful People gimmick have become. If you don't like that, too bad. You're probably in the minority at this point. Then we had our four-way main event for the world title with Lashley, Rude, MVP, and Aries. The way they set it up in the opener was pretty paint by numbers, but the match delivered, especially the tail end of it. The only problem was that it left the Lockdown plans still kind of unclear as they went off the air. But that's the risk you run when you only start setting this stuff up on the go-home show. As a setup for Lockdown, you could pick a lot of this show apart. But since Lockdown is just a steel cage-themed Impact show now, I guess we can't really expect the same level of hype. But taken on its own, this was the best Impact TNA has produced since the new TV deal started, in my opinion. This was a really good show. I don't know if it's going to feel like enough hype for Lockdown ultimately, but we'll decide that when we get there. Over. Out.